get started. I'm going to start because we do finish on time. Thank you, Nankhonde, for being today with us. I've shared your profile with the participants. We're all volunteers. We're trying to learn from people we invite so that we can cascade this forward to connect with you. Yeah, just having a new family here that you know and that you can reach out in case you need any support with what you're doing. We're here to help each other. Everybody helps each other here. Nankhonde, I don't know if you want to share some slides on your latest work, or we just have discussion from the beginning.
I think we can have a discussion from the beginning. I have got some slides, and it's similar to what I've shared with you, Antonio.
Okay.
So if you want me to set some context around what I'm doing and why, I can do that.
Can you, Nankhonde, please introduce you to the group? It's always nicer to hear in words than reading a CV. So what's been your career, different phases, different changes? Because now you're really focusing on executive coaching, but you've done so many things. So just from your words, what did you study? How did you evolve? Just a bit of background so that we know and everybody knows who you are, Nankhonde.
If my connection is poor, let me know and I'll switch off the video because connectivity is low.
Yeah.
So I'll keep it on until you let me know that you can't hear me or it's breaking.
Okay.
So it's okay?
Yes. Oh.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. We hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm over the last 10 years, I have built a management consulting firm from scratch, and I've specialized in executive coaching and change management here in Zambia. And my experience here has been quite interesting because executive coaching is quite a new profession in terms of recognition and opportunities. But it is new in the sense that there are not that many executive coaches who are from Zambia, indigenous. And in terms of my business and clients, I worked a lot in both the public and private sector. So I've worked with multinationals, international organizations. I've worked with the government, the Office of the President and Cabinet, the Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Home Affairs. And so I've got a spectrum of clients that I've built up over the last 10 years and really focusing on leadership development and building leaders for the future Africa. And that has been something that is important to me because of the background that I will share shortly. And so my business is focused on these areas and coming to support leadership development and change management. So right now, I am the change management or project leader for the restructuring of the National Water Utility Company in our capital city. And so these are some of the projects that my firm has taken on and I'm leading. And it's been quite interesting because as much as I have trained and been educated in the West, I've had to bring those best practices to Africa and translate them in a way that they can have meaning but also be sustainable. And I think that's where the opportunity for me has been. Prior to this 10 years and I was running programs across headquarters in New York and Geneva, and then eventually went on to run a program in Senegal, a regional program, fluent in French. And so I was able to get some regional expertise and country level expertise running country specific programs. A lot of my work actually from a development perspective, where my career started, was focusing on delivering change at a large scale, whether it's global, regional, or country level. And it was across different sectors. And this UN experience really showed me that, we have development projects and development aid in different countries across the world. But what extent have we really reaped the benefits or seen change? And why are we not seeing some of the systemic and fundamental problems being resolved? And one of the classic ones is, you know, the morbidity and the disease burden of malaria, for example, in Africa is still very high, and yet so much money is pumped into the health systems to support this. And so my development career made me think about what is it that what are we missing? And this led me to think about how can we do something? How can I contribute to the change that I have noticed through my career? And what can I do in my own world, at my own level, to contribute to impactful and long-term sustainable change? And that's how the development experience took me now to come back to my own country and contribute to my economy using my background, my education, and my knowledge. And so I have an academic background in management. I have an MBA specializing in project management, but I also have an executive specialized master's specializing in coaching, consulting, and leading large-scale change. And everything I have studied has been to support me to do what I believe in, and also get the qualifications and the networks to support my opportunities that I see and my ability to deliver them. And I think the most impactful course I did was the change program in 2017. Oxford University and HEC Paris have a joint executive specialized masters. And that was quite transformative for me because that set me apart, not just here, but also in terms of my mindset and how I view my contribution. And I think this is what has really led me to what I'm doing today. And what I have been working on over the last few years, and how I met Marshall Goldsmith and became a member of the MG 100, was about looking at pioneers in executive coaching on the continent and seeing what we're doing at a Pan-African level, but also building the tools that are Africa-focused, Africa-centered, building on best practices. And right now, in January, I will be launching a psychometric assessment that looks at African culture and context when supporting best practices. And my competency model really identifies what are the key parameters, what are the key areas for excellence and execution in Africa, how are they influenced by context and culture, and as a result, what kind of tools can we develop as Africans, building on global best practices that are effective in our context, in our conditions, and with our people. And so my contribution to Africa has really been shaped through this particular product or tool that I believe brings together both my development experience and background and my executive coaching experience and background. But more important for me, it's about legacy. It is about why do I see the world the way I do? Why have I had certain opportunities? And as a result, what am I giving back? And for me, this is about paying forward, because I have had the privilege of coming from a family that was able to give me a global and excellent education, and using that, because privilege is a responsibility in my context, in particular in Africa, I feel I do have a responsibility to pay it forward. I think I'll end there and then we can.
Thank you, Nankhonde. Just quick curiosity question. When you were in high school, what did you want to be? Did you want to be an executive coach, or what was your dream when you were around high school?
I actually wanted to be a doctor, like my father, and I didn't get the grades, so that killed that. And then I had three options. You know, from an African culture, you have usually three options: you either become a doctor or lawyer or an accountant. And those were the options my parents gave me because of where they were coming from. My parents come from very humble beginnings, and they focused on our education because they knew our education would not only transform our opportunities and our world, but would set us apart. And from the background of my parents, it was felt that lawyer, doctor, accountant are the best professions to get you there. So my first degree, I actually got into a law school, and I failed the second year. And I only got into FUMI out of the 3. And when I failed the second year, I think my parents finally understood, maybe let her do something that she will enjoy. And that's how I did management. And I went on to look at organizational behavior, organizational structures and systems, and I thrive and enjoy management, which is actually what built my executive coaching career much later down the line.
Very interesting. And Konde, can you give us a bit of context on the situation in Zambia today? Just that we learn a bit more about, where are you? How is it going? Politically as well, just for us to know better.
So Zambia is in Southern Africa, and it has a population of about 17 million. And we are one of the 7 emerging market fast, and have had a high growth rate recorded over the last, I would say, maybe 10 years or so. And being identified for further is to move to middle income status are there. And so Zambia has been a very stable and peaceful country, and until most recently, economically stable, as well as in terms of peace and security. Now, one of the issues we have been dealing with, I think, from an economic perspective, is we have had challenges with fiscal responsibility from the public sector. And I think this is something globally is an issue. So our borrowing from the public sector has exceeded our capacity to repay our loans. And our expenditure has been going more towards consumption than longer term sustainable projects like, for example, more investment in infrastructure and energy and sectors that will develop. Zambia is famous for copper. So traditionally, we have relied heavily on our income from copper. And as the copper prices fluctuate or change, our economy gets affected. But what I would say about Zambia is that it's an interesting country to watch, because in terms of African development indicators, it is doing in the key sectors. And these, and if you
we're losing your...
Look at some of the challenges that most African countries are battling with. The
Nankhonde, can you cut your camera? You're freezing. Can you cut your camera? Might be better.
Is that better? Cut it.
It was freezing.
Is that better? We have just begun the rainy season.
No, we don't hear you now. You got frozen. You might be the rainy season, huh? Oh, she's gone. Anybody of the group has been in Zambia?
No, yet.
Okay. Nankhonde is back. Nankhonde, are you back?
Yes, I am back.
Now we hear you loud and clear, and we see a nice picture.
Good. November is the rainy season, the start of the rainy season here. And so other than the normal connectivity issues, the rainy season also makes it a bit harder to sustain a good connection. But the rainy season is also a good season for us because it affects our food security and ability to have food throughout the year. So today it's actually raining quite heavily and it's been very hot. And so we welcome the rain, but there are challenges that come with the rain.
Nankhonde, I have a few questions before I ask the team to. First, if there's something we can do to help you or in Zambia, what could be, what kind of support are people looking there? Is it the knowledge? What could be useful to help people with advice or connections? What is, according to you, what's something that it's needed now with the crisis?
So I think, as you may have seen, all of the world has been dealing with COVID. And what has been interesting in Africa is that whilst we have been affected, we have not seen the kind of levels of really disruption that the Northern Hemisphere has seen. And we think that in terms of our own responses, it's partly due to the high recovery rate. And so this year, I think, has been a challenge for leadership at every level to try and understand how to prepare for, deal, and navigate crisis. And so most plans for 2020 have been disrupted. And I think when we talk about support, it's really around identifying ways to transfer knowledge around resilience, around supporting leadership to be able to evolve and adapt quickly to the way the world is changing so fast. The world has become much smaller, and you can see already on this, as we're on this live feed, the world is smaller, so you have access to so many people and resources. And I think one of the things that is important, and why I was very happy to be a guest here, is we need more bridges. We need more connections with other parts of the world, because COVID just made us realize that at a certain level, there are many things that we are dealing with together, although our context changes how we can respond to them. So in terms of support, I think knowledge transfer is important, and knowledge transfer at being able to manage, to lead and be successful in different sectors. I also think what is important is learning from Africa. Very often, we look to help Africa. And actually, there's a lot of experience here that can be shared, that can help you. And so I will continue to think about how you can help here. But I also would like to open up the reverse. How can we help you, and how can I help you? Because the world is smaller. The bridges have been created through these opportunities. And there is a lot that we can learn from our collective experiences. The world is dealing with diversity and inclusion issues. The world is dealing with the pandemic together. Leadership, character, these things have been demonstrated as important and necessary. And so there's so many lessons that we have and we can use to exchange.
Nankhonde, I love what you say, and I want to go a bit deeper on that, because let me just tell you my own experience. I went to Ghana a few years ago, and I felt like there are very few continents which talk about the continent themselves. In Europe, we are all, we don't talk about any Europe anymore. We talk about Spain, Italy, and the US is the same. But in Africa, you talk about Africa, and you're all proud of being Africans. And for me, that was very powerful, talking about a whole continent together. Of course, there's difference, but tell me a bit more on what you just said. What can we learn from you? What can we ask from people like you and your network?
I think there's two sides. There's a part that is related to supporting experiences that can inform decisions that I think the rest of the world is being confronted with. And in particular, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, you know, Africa has had an experience with colonialism. And, you know, Zambia, we turned 56 years, I think, post-colonialism this year. But what did we take from it? And how does it help us understand how to work on diversity and inclusion? And why is diversity and inclusion important in the first place? Because different perspectives can help bring out better results and more sustainable results. When Zambia got its independence in 1964, the then president, Kenneth Kaunda, had a philosophy called humanism. And this is something that was shared across Africa, and you can see it in Ubuntu. Ubuntu is about I exist because you exist, and you exist because I exist, and our success is tied. And so what humanism did at independence was to create an even playing field for everybody. So he recognized that we have 73 tribes in Zambia, ethnic groups in Zambia, but we also had the transfer of power from the British to the indigenous Zambians. And so the challenge was, how do you get everybody to work together and unite and not be divided? So what humanism did was the philosophy that I grew up with, my parents have been drilled and embedded in us. And humanism says, we are human first. Doesn't matter whether you're British, doesn't matter whether you're Zambian, doesn't matter whether you're a tribe from the north or the south, we're human first. And as humans, we will develop Zambia. After we're humans, we are then Zambian. And then Zambian, we're then our tribes. So you can see the factor that united us. And this crosses across Africa. So where are our connecting elements in our relationships? Doesn't matter what race, what ethnicity, what sex we are. At a fundamental level, we are united. And I think that comes out very strongly. And that's why you see experiences like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission after apartheid with Nelson Mandela. And even when you see things like, for example, because it's not all perfect, that happened in Rwanda, the genocide, it was about division. It was about breaking that unity and making people think that their differences matter. But fundamentally, across the continent, we've been raised to believe that we are Africans and we can work together to achieve collective goals. And those collective goals transcend my party, transcend my politics, transcend my class, and transcend different levels. So when we have to work together, we rally together. And I think that's something that we can take as lessons in terms of diversity and inclusion. Something else I think that we can take from Africa is that technology and the digital revolution has really transformed the continent and brought in innovation at a scale that we've never really seen before the last, I would say, decade. And what this means is that from an African perspective, we've been able to avoid some of the lessons that the West has learned over time. And we've been able to actually use our position being behind to skip generations and learn and design the future of Africa. In addition to that, because we're developing, there are so many opportunities on the African continent. And I always say, if you're in the West, you've got cherry cola, you've got pineapple cola, you've got apple cola, you've got all flavors of Coca-Cola. In Africa, we're just getting through the original flavor. But I use this as a metaphor because every sector, every industry is in development. And so the opportunities here to either become part of bringing knowledge, bringing experience, bringing investments are in every sector. And because you have this maybe advantage of being part of a more developed and advanced context, coming to Africa means your perspective can inform and can enrich, but can also jump on opportunities. And I think that's where, again, the experience of sharing what are the opportunities in Africa, what can we learn from here, but also what can be done here is very rich.
Thank you, Nankhonde. Super interesting views. I always, when I talk to leaders, I bring the example of Rwanda and the reconciliation that happened there with Paul Kagame. And there's some bad talking about part of it now, but for me, it's an impressive model of reconciliation after such a, like you saw, separation, showing unity. So I can relate to what you're saying. And I love what you're saying, that you're skipping some of these phases in technology disruption. So just jump on the next one. And I'm afraid people don't know what's happening in Africa. I don't know what it is that, why do you think what happens in Africa doesn't come across that easily? Is it a question I don't know, I've been thinking, why don't we know more stories about all the great things?
I think Africa is so vast. Africa is 54 countries. This continent is huge. And so I do think to a certain extent, information coming out is based on interest or focus. But as Africans also, we tend to take a global worldview. So we tend to know more about what's happening beyond our borders because we thrive on information. And we also understand how experiences and exposure help us to develop. So whenever we travel somewhere, we always bring information back. And our worldview is actually wider because that is part of our experience of developing. And on the reverse, I think because of the way the Northern Hemisphere is developing, sometimes there is no need to know about what's happening across the world. Sometimes, you know, if you look at the size of the United States, you know, it's enough work just knowing what's happening on the East Coast if you live on the West Coast.
Yeah.
If you're in Europe, I think Europe is even closer and has a closer relationship. So I was educated in the UK. I went to British boarding schools, you know, and so when you look at the UK, again, because of the positioning, you get to know more about other European countries, other European cultures, because access and traveling is easier. So first of all, traveling to Africa sometimes is narrated as the dark continent. So first of all, there's a sort of fear and myths around what Africa is, what you can catch there, and how backward people are. And you can only appreciate fully what Africa offers to the world, and it's by traveling there and by exploring it, whether virtually or physically. And I think as interest grows, as the media changes the way it portrays Africa, a growing interest starts to develop beyond the poverty storyline. And I think as that continues to grow, you will see more people interested and informed about what's happening here. And I always refer to, you know, I'm an Afropolitan. I'm very African. I'm traditional in my culture, but I've been exposed and I have traveled the world. And as a result of that, I'm able to see more and more of what's happening on the continent, where the Western lifestyle practices and lifestyle that we are adopting here is being translated into our culture. And so we're developing what is now the Afropolitan. And the Afropolitan is very similar to the middle income, middle class and growing Northern Hemisphere or Western world, where the working class. A lot of our lifestyles are actually very similar. And that's because as we're building the continent, we are consuming the same things. Over.
Thank you, Nankhonde. Let me see if there's any comments here. Who can comment here? Mark, do you want to share something? And then Mark Prinsky, otherwise we go to Paula.
Hi, Nankhonde.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. It's lovely to hear from that part of the world, and because we don't often get a chance to do that. And so, so very welcome for coming and sharing your experience with us. You had mentioned, as you were speaking, that Zambia had a high COVID recovery rate. So that served to minimize economic impacts there. Why do you think that was the case? What policies were implemented by your government or by business leaders or by regional leaders that minimized those impacts?
So I'll give a bit of context to what I'm about to say. In my previous development life, one of the roles I had was I was seconded to New York in 2006 to help develop the global guidelines for the response to avian influenza. And our job was to help support countries to deal with the WHO pandemic levels if they got to 5. What would governments need to do, and how would we support the UN system and its operations in 191 countries and the staff? And so that was a very interesting experience for me because we built the scenarios that we're living today. So that's the background I bring to this. And we are actually living one of the scenarios we built. One of the scenarios that we did not fully appreciate was how to open the economy after phase 5 was set, and we had to, and the countries had to shut down. We really underestimated that impact. Now, from an African perspective, we carry a disease burden that is quite heavy on a normal basis.
Mm-hmm.
And we have tropical diseases that we have to deal with, and our health system is used to dealing with. In Zambia in particular, we had a higher surveillance system because of the threat of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is our neighbor. We had to heighten the surveillance system because we were worried about what would happen if Ebola got into the country. So we, by virtue of monitoring diseases and by virtue of the threat of Ebola and what it did, we were actually already prepared for disease surveillance, and investments had been made in those areas. Also, with pandemics, you can see what happens as they cross over the world. Africa tends to be delayed by the time it gets here because of the travel. And you can see in Africa, the countries that were affected the most were the larger countries that tend to be more developed, but also have higher density populations in urban areas, have high tourism. And so when COVID came to Zambia, it was actually a Zambian couple flying back home from Europe who brought it into Zambia. They were patient zero. And so it was brought into the country. But again, the countries that were affected the most on the continent were those that are known for development and high tourism and movements of people. So Zambia is not as developed as South Africa, Nigeria, or Kenya, which were hit differently. In addition, every year in Zambia, in the rainy season, our water and sanitation systems are not that developed everywhere. So we have cholera outbreaks. And the behaviors to deal with cholera are wash your hands. When you're coughing, we have tuberculosis is here. Do not cough, cover yourself. So our social messaging, our public health messagings were already there. So we didn't have to really reinvent the wheel. We already had policies to respond to emergencies because of cholera, to respond to emergencies from Ebola. So you could almost say that we somehow were prepared to deal with it. Now, the high recovery rate is something the scientists are still trying to understand. That doom message that I think Melinda Gates shared, that there'll be bodies all across Africa and people would die, has been interesting because if you look at our health system would not be able to cope with the number of cases that Europe and America are seeing on a good day. But in the worst case, the health system would just collapse. But something is happening here, and I don't know whether it's genetic, whether it's related to the DNA. The scientists are still trying to figure it out. Our recovery rate is 90%, if
Wow.
not 95%. And our health system was able to quickly set up isolation centers, mobilize drugs, divert the resources to assist with the increase in the masks, social distancing, all those messages. Everything was good. And I had personal experience of COVID here because my husband works for in development here, and they restructured their programs to buy ventilators because everybody was anticipating the demand on the health system. And my husband caught COVID through work because he was part of the critical staff who still had to go to work to support the government's response. And we had access to a private hospital, but in the end, he ended up in the government hospital because it was the best place for him. Our doctors are geared to deal with health emergencies. And so I think our level of preparedness, because of our past experience, helped us respond. The leadership was very quick to make decisions and to send out one consistent message across the country. And I think where we've seen differences, it's because the leadership has not united and understood what clear communication are we going to give the citizens? What are we going to prioritize? And what do they need to know and when? Our leadership is actually very good at that. And in a way, you can say sometimes it's a byproduct of our quasi-dictatorship leadership. It works in this case in crisis because you needed one message, you needed one messenger, and you needed everybody to act, and it worked.
Well, I'm really glad that your system was already put in place and you were prepared to do this. You had the infrastructure. It's an amazing case of how when the rest of the world was scrambling, you had things pretty much in order, although there are always unknowns with any type of pandemic. It seems like you were able to, not have the economic impacts that our other countries around the world have, and certainly ones with many more resources. I mean, I am even thinking about my own country here in Canada. The fact that we had lockdown as long as we did, and then we have quite a few precautions and how it's affecting our own economy. So I would really love to read any case study you'd like to read. I mean, that you'd like to write about all of the things that made your situation work for Zambians, and based on pre-existing structures and infrastructure that you've put into place to deal with this, to preview and preempt any negative impact. So in the same way that we're looking to New Zealand and to Denmark and to other countries like Taiwan that have had some really remarkable outcomes from this COVID pandemic, you should be lauding the results of your country as well. So, I would please keep us informed if you do write something around that.
Yeah.
Okay, I will do. And I think it's interesting because, sometimes being less developed means that you already have coping mechanisms and contingencies in place, and you don't have that, I would almost say being developed means that you're not used to dealing with crisis. And so your shock and trauma in response can be quite significant, whereas we're used to dealing with challenges. And so getting into gear to respond to the latest crisis is part of our story.
Thank you, Nankhonde.
Very, very nice question, Paula, and really an eye-opener. I think this is to look at the world a bit different. I still have 4 questions here I want to go through, so let's keep it to the point, but let's start with the basis and then Mark. The basis, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from India.
Hi.
My question to Nankhonde is, first of all, thank you so much for having such a nice and passionate representation of the work which you are doing. So my question is that since Africa is a big country, even including Zambia is also quite big, how you are creating more Nankhonde like you, and what is your vision in this regard?
Good question. I belong to a group called the Africa List. And the Africa List is an invitation-only funded organization that identifies future leaders from emerging economies in Africa. Through those networks, they actually develop you in your various fields and sectors so that you can go on to take up in the future, whether it's business leadership or political leadership roles. And so being part of that network has helped me meet other African leaders who have a heart for the continent, but also have a purpose and passion to associate their work with going beyond their markets. And in terms of building more people like myself, I think one part I didn't share is that in 2008, my father and some business partners developed the first private medical university in the country. And this university has now was the first and is now the largest. We have 7,000 students and we have 400 employees. And so for me, when my father passed away in 2017, I took on his role on the board, and we are co-majority shareholders. That legacy that my father left was about making sure that we continue not only to develop Africans to support our health systems, but also changing the kind of leadership we want to see. So our university trains in pharmacy, radiology, environmental health, nursing, and doctors. And so the reason I'm able to sit on the board, and I also sit on another board for the largest life insurance company in Zambia, is because these leadership roles give me an opportunity to actually prepare myself and the people around me who I'm associated or support to continue what they're doing in their fields, but have the competencies and skills that I can impart to them. And so in my work, I have worked across the 10 provinces of Zambia. I have built leaders across this country. I have personally coached and trained over 700 people in the last 10 years from not just a touch point, but taken them on to success. For me, doing what I do is reaching out to ensure that I help other people become successful in what they're doing. And there are many more people like myself who are not replicating themselves. And this is something I remember saying when Nelson Mandela died. There were some messages saying, you know, who's going to be the next Nelson Mandela? For me, we don't actually need another Nelson Mandela. We need everybody to become Nelson Mandela wherever they are in whatever they're doing. We're going to develop this continent. And so my work has been focusing about not duplicating myself, but rather passing on those experiences of success and capabilities to all the people I work with. And when I talk about privilege as a responsibility, because I do have a profile in the country, I have a platform where I can share. And I speak on a radio station that goes across the country. And it goes to people who will probably never meet me. But because they're in a rural location, they have a radio, I actually can share and interpret some of the leadership best practices that I have traveled to Oxford to learn to the lowest person in my country. And so I think it's being responsible in the platforms we have access to and using them to share information and help other people become the success that they are supposed to be in their lives. I'm part of networks, and I've been on boards in Kenya and in South Africa that support this agenda, that we use our opportunity, we use our privilege to make sure that the people who will never get to go to France actually learn about the management style, the French management style, and those who will probably never go to America. I can see Mark thinking, but it's interesting. I studied the French, the way, the role of le cadre of manager in France is very interesting. But sharing that knowledge and helping people take the best practices that they need from different things, leadership best practices that I've learned from Marshall Goldsmith. There are people across who don't even know who Marshall is, but they actually now understand triggers and how to become more emotionally intelligent. And so that's the way I think I support development. That's the way I actually make sure that the impact I have goes beyond my grave.
Thank you so much. So much inspiring to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Devasi, for the question. And Nankhonde, now that you're speaking, one of our volunteer group are developing something around a COVID unit. So I think they might be come back to you to ask some questions and maybe a collaboration. It's part of that non-profit, but I think there can be some, at least a good discussion, because we're very, very much involved in South Africa as well, starting to pick up there too. So, but don't want to interrupt because I know Mark is there who has a question, Deepa too. And Mark, go ahead.
Hi, this has been very inspiring. Thank you, Nankhonde. I have two issues. One is good because we just had the basis talking. When I hear the three things that kids can become, when I've always heard this from India, they say doctor, lawyer, engineer. You said doctor, lawyer, accountant. And the interesting thing is we now see Indian engineers around the world. We don't see Zambian accountants around the world. So is there an opportunity to sort of help people prioritize where they push or or encourage kids to go into. And that just those three words can make a big difference. The second thing that I want you to comment on essentially is leapfrogging, because I've always believed that. I thought that was wonderful. And what I would like to connect with people around is, how do we leapfrog in what we used to call education, which is now becoming empowerment, which is really that the opportunity where we possibly could leapfrog, because otherwise everybody will just try to catch up in the same race, and that's not really going to work for the future. So I'd love your comments.
Thank you. Very interesting questions. I think I'll start with the leapfrogging, and education, I think, is one of the key sectors that the whole world is trying to figure out. And one is access, the other is quality and outputs. And so I think what technology has done is change what we know as a traditional classroom to different experiences of where learning is happening and where learning can be impactful. And I think what has happened in terms of education and leapfrogging here is that we've given more, should I say, students or children access, because that was our first development priority. The second is now, once you've got them in the classroom, is what you're teaching actually going to change something? Is it going to change their lives? Is it going to actually, in that change, develop the country and bring forward the future industries, the future, because we're still trying to industrialize in so many sectors. So are we still going to have that opportunity? And when I think about the future of education across the world, I think about what is happening, what is the future of development here, and what are the competencies and skills that we're going to need in the next 10, 20 years? And how have we set up education systems that are going to deliver that? And we're still stuck in the bureaucracy of the old traditional systems of teaching. And that's why you're starting to see more and more people are choosing to homeschool. You've got increasing different ways to learn, whether it's through mentorship, vocational training, different ways of actually learning, because we've realized that it's not just in the classroom that education is happening exclusively. And even when you have access to a classroom, it is a bonus, but you have to complement it. The other thing is also the millennials, I think, have changed learning. The way they think, the way they learn, the way they act is so different to when I grew up. And so observing these millennials, understanding that there's this shift to the gig economy. What does it mean then in terms of what we're learning and what we have to prepare the world, we have to prepare people for through education. So I think that's really something that is evolving, and technology has really supported a shift in how we've been delivering education, but also the quality and access to education. In terms of where should we be pushing, encouraging development and further education. And it's interesting you say that in India, it's similar. They have that pitch, the parents have that pitch that push the children towards certain professions. I think what's happening now is that we're discovering that even in Zambia, with that push for lawyers, doctors, and accountants, what is becoming of these people? A lot of them enter these professions and have not been satisfied, have not been fulfilled, and have then, as a result, gone on to compromise. And so we're redefining what success means. And I think that's where it starts. Because success is about aligning your strengths and doing the work you love that complements that and that achieves results that you want to achieve and that you can contribute to. And I think we're revisiting that whole notion of that there's a specific profession that can deliver that. We're moving more towards person-centered, human-centered decisions and choices. And I think that's where the shift is coming, because when we are looking at the literature and the evidence around success, it's really coming from people thriving in what they're doing because they love it. And so you can even see now what's happening in Africa is that there's been less of a push on specific professions, and there's been more a push towards do what you will do that will make you successful. At the end of the day, it achieves the same objective. If it creates wealth, great. If it helps the family progress, great. But it must at least make a difference. And I think we're seeing that increasingly. So in terms of pushing professions, I think that whole language is shifting because the world has opened up so many more opportunities. And even in Zambia, I recently supported there's an organization for gemologists. And I did a sort of motivational talk for them. When I was growing up, I would have never thought that I could study to be a gemologist or to be a jewelry designer. And, you know, these professions just weren't available. They were not accessible. But now we're learning that these industries are developing and opportunities are there that you can go into. So the programs to even study in some of these areas are growing. So I think as the world is changing, we're discovering what are the future industries, what's the future skills that are going to be productive. You know, climate change, you know, not long ago, there were no courses to study, you know, the effects of climate change and to have roles and jobs to actually deal with it. We can see how the world is changing. So increasingly, you're seeing people studying environmental science, and not just for the sake of sanitation and water programs, projects which have been traditional here, but on a broader level. So as the world is shifting, the opportunities are shifting, and we are trying to see how the demand in producing the type of graduates that can meet the needs of the world is growing. It's really changing our priorities. I hope that answers the question well.
Thank you. Yes. I see Mark is going to reach out to you. Do you mind, Nankhonde, if we share your contact?
Please. And also, earlier we were talking about, you know, the COVID experience in Zambia, anything I'll produce. What I would like to offer the group is, I'm in a specific field. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an executive coach, but at the same time, I am a connector. And I think that's the heart of my purpose. And so if there are any areas or industries or even topics that you're interested in, whether if I may have some knowledge or experience in it, or I may not, but I may know somebody who does. And that goes beyond Zambia, maybe stretching to my network on the continent. And if there are areas you want to explore further, whether they're business opportunities, whether opportunities to volunteer, whether you're looking for information or research, or whether you just want to know a bit more, I'm very happy for you to contact me.
Well, I will need to leave it there. Sorry, Deepa, I couldn't get to the question and Bebak, but I want to finish on time. Thank you, Nankhonde. You're open at least my eyes of what's happening in a big part of the world, and there's so much to learn. I think every time I talk to somebody from Africa, I learn, and not just thinking, but mindset and philosophy of life. I'm so happy that you make it for us, because it's highly difficult to get people like you in this type of forum. So I'm I guess from the whole team, and there will be many people reading and listening to this afterwards. It's been a great session.
Yes.
I second that.
Thank you. Thank you, Nankhonde. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot. Very nice.
Thank you, Nankhonde. We'll share with you the recording. We'll share with the team everything.
Thank you, everyone.
Next week, we have to work. So we're going to help a startup, a business in Pakistan who's struggling. So it's going to be a workshop where we put all our brains together to try to find a way to help these people there. So
Sure.
I look forward to see you. I want to thank you, everybody, for being here every Thursday. It's good to connect, and Nankhonde, back again to you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.